So my name is Justin, and I am an alcoholic and addict. I've been with the Freeman House since March of 2019. My sobriety date is December 7th of 2018. I went to treatment, and after that, a little while at a homeless shelter when I decided to reach out to Sean because I wasn't getting the connection that I needed living in a homeless shelter. Basically, like my quick version of my story is I drank and drugged my entire life away. I lost my kids, I lost my family, I lost my license, my place to live. I was homeless and living in a car, and I was hopeless. Like I couldn't hold a job, I couldn't get up and do day labor. Every place was sending me home because I always had either the smell of alcohol in my breath or I'd been up for days and would like just find places to like fall asleep in these job places, and they'd let me go. So I'd been to 4 treatments at that point in time. I struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction for the majority of my adult life. I picked up when I was 16. Some people say that like they're born addicts or alcoholics, and I'm not really sure if I was born an addict and alcoholic. What I am sure of is that like I was born with a broken thinker. I never felt like I belonged. I never felt like I fit in, and alcohol and drugs were the solution to that problem. It made me feel like I was a part of something for the first time in my life, and it saved me for a long period of time. For a long period of time, drugs and alcohol were my crutch. They made me be able to socialize, to interact, to form friendships, and be semi-social. Because without it, I didn't know how to exist. And then it just started taking from me, you know, because I needed it all the time in order to feel normal. So it wasn't like a slow progression. Like I picked up drugs and alcohol and I just wanted to be high and drunk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from the time that I picked up. I wasn't physically addicted to it, but mentally from the very first time, I just wanted to feel like that all the time. And so over the course of from 16 to 41 years old, I went to 4 different treatments, in and out of AA over and over and over again. Sean, the owner of the Freeman House, was my first sponsor. I met him sometime around 2006 when I was arrested and sentenced to the drug court program of Stratford County. I needed a sponsor, and when I raised my hand at a meeting, he was the first one that he like beelined it across the meeting to me. He was like, "Hey, I'm Sean. How you doing? You want to grab a cup of coffee?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, man." So like, we kept in touch over the years. Like the drug court program didn't keep me sober, and as much as Sean might have loved to see me stay sober, like I needed to want it more than he wanted it for me, you know. So we kept in touch over the years. I'd call him up and he'd be like, "Hey, I'm in Florida." And I'd be like, "Hey, I'm in a treatment center in Arizona." You know, that sort of stuff. And so I knew who he was. So fast forward, all these treatment centers, I'm homeless, living in a car. I lost custody of my daughter. I can't hold a job. I'm doing whatever drugs are put in front of me. I'm drinking every day. And I'm arrested on December 7th, 2018. Wake up in a jail cell at Stratford County, not really sure what I'm doing there. And I do that like foxhole prayer they talk about in AA, where I was just like, "Please God, get me out of this," you know? Like curled up in a ball on the floor with the mattress that they give me over me because it's cold and I'm laying on a cement floor. And I get out and I start walking down the road, and I called my mother, who came and picked me up. That was my first God shot moment, because my mom normally works at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I happened to be getting out of jail that morning at 8:30, and she was running late for work. And when I called, she was getting off exit 9 in Somersworth, which was about 4 minutes from where I was walking down the road. So she picked me up and drove me and dropped me off at the BHU. So I ended up in sober living. Like, I guess fast forward, like, you know, went to treatment, got out of treatment, went to homeless shelter because I didn't want to do sober living. Now I'm in this homeless shelter and I'm feeling like apart from it. I'm starting to go crazy and I'm not working a program. I can't make myself get a sponsor. I'm going to a million meetings a week, but I'm not doing any work, right? So I decided to give Sean a call. He said, why don't you come over for one of our family dinners and see what it's all about? So I went over to Stark Ave in Dover, New Hampshire for one of their family dinners. I don't remember who was there, but I remember feeling like at home. And the house was beautiful. The people were cool. There was a guy, I remember this guy that was running the house at the time. He had like 8 months of sobriety. And I had 3 months, but like I thought this guy was like a god. Like I really did. I was like, 8 months of sobriety, like that's absolutely insane. Like how did he do it? I want to know how he did it and how he got to where he's at. And so I moved into the house and I started my journey. The house required me that I get a sponsor, that I work the 12 steps, that I go to at least 4 meetings a week, and I attend accountability meetings. The meetings were no problem. I was going to like 20 meetings a week at that point in time, just trying to stay sane. But the sponsorship and the step work, that's where I always fell short every single time that I tried to get sober. And I needed something or somebody there to help encourage me. I've always done well in structure. I've always gone to rehab and like been the guy that everybody thinks that's gonna make it, but like 2 days later falling on my face after I get out, because like I can do the work when there's somebody there. It's when there's nobody looking that I was having a hard time like doing what I needed to do. So I'm in this house with these guys, and we're in this meeting once a week where we go around in a circle and we talk about like what step we're on, what progress we made, have we met with our sponsor, you know, where we are in the big book, where we are in our writing. And something about that really encouraged me to do the work, because I didn't want to be that guy that showed up at the accountability meeting and was like, I didn't do anything this week. So I started doing the work. I read through the big book with my sponsor. We got up to the 4th step. And that's really what the Freeman House really encourages, is to do a 4th step, a 4th and 5th step, where we take a personal inventory, right? We find out exactly what's going on inside of us that makes us want to drink in the first place. And what are these character defects that we have that bring us shame, guilt, and remorse, so that like we start getting that restless, irritable, and discontent feeling and go back out again. So I do this 4th step, and I read with my sponsor. It took me about 12 hours to get through my 4th step and read my 5th step to my sponsor. And I was encouraged due to the rent reductions as well. You know what I mean? Like the Freeman House offered rent reductions, and I was making $12 an hour, nothing to write home about, working, 35 hours a week or something, and to save $25 a week was a big deal for me at that point in time. So I got that done. I read my 5th. Time progressed in the house, man. I don't really know how else to put it. Like I stayed, once I did my 5th step, I was like really compelled by the Spirit, the sunlight of the Spirit, whatever it is. I wanted to help other people. I wanted to help other people in the house, like get through their steps. I wanted to help other people in the house, like understand what it's like to have a spiritual awakening, to get to the point where like the obsession is lifted, and I felt like that was something that happened to me due to reading my 5th step. Like the freedom that came from me reading my 5th step was nothing short. Like I remember I didn't even tell people when I was reading it. I didn't say anything about it. But the very first time Sean saw me after I read my 5th step, he looks at me and he's like, something's different about you, man. What's going on? He's like, you look lighter. And I was. It was like this huge weight was lifted from me when I read my 5th step. Like all of these things that had been holding me down with all this guilt and shame, it was just released, It was just like flew into the sky, and I was free to like start over, a clean slate. And that's what I did. So recovery, love, wholeness, right? Like that's the motto. That's the mission statement, right? And I'm sure like there's more to our mission statement than just those words, but to like sum it up, the mission statement would be recovery, love, and wholeness, right? And like reversing it is the wholeness I get from my connection with my spirit, The love that like I'm able to show other people due to having a connection with a higher power, like to be able to like meet people directly where they're at, like you know, this position so that I'm in here sometimes requires me to ask people to leave the house, and to be able to do that from a place of love, which sounds crazy when I'm saying it, but like what it looks like when you're doing it from a place of love is like letting them know that they're enough, letting them know that there's nothing wrong with them, and that I love them unconditionally no matter what, and that I really hope that they get the help that they need, and that I'm there to help find them that help if they want to continue looking for it. And what that ends up looking like is text messages a month or two later saying, hey man, thank you for doing that. That was exactly what I needed to be able to like move forward in my life. I needed to have that happen so that I could be catapulted to the next level of my recovery, and then recovery in general. Like that's what I do every day. Like I work my recovery every single day. Like it doesn't get a day off. I don't get to like wake up and go like, oh, I don't feel like doing a recovery today. Some of the guys have been texting me today and saying, oh, it's Labor Day. Are we not doing step writing today? I said, I didn't realize that my addiction took a day off. Like I don't get to say today's a holiday. I'm not an alcoholic anymore. So every single day I have to do something for my recovery. I wake up, I pray, I meditate, I read daily reflections. I help another alcoholic or addict to the best of my ability. And if I can't help one, I don't hurt one, right? And I go to meetings. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. They both know that he's my sponsor. Even after having completed the steps, I still communicate with him on a weekly basis. It's a different type of relationship today than it was as he was taking me through the steps. It's growing more into a friendship than a sponsorship. And that happens in time, Things that I've done in the house, at about 18 months into it, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, the world shut down. And I was blessed to be in a place where like the rest of the world like had no meetings and had no fellowship, and everybody was scrambling to get on Zoom. And I was able to go downstairs and put together meetings and groups for the guys in the house to be able to participate in their recovery on a daily basis. There was a young man here named Ben that was with us at the time. He was our spiritual lead, and him and I spent a lot of time together, reading through the big book, creating ideas and dreaming, and creating paperwork for people to have a path towards the steps in case they couldn't get out and find a sponsor. That's been implemented into our step work on a weekly basis now. Sometime in the whole throw of COVID was when Sean and Ben at the time had like written up this outline of what it looked like to be a recovery lead, a house leader. And I was working with them on all sorts of different things with step work and groups that we were doing and stuff like that. And they brought me downstairs in the basement and they handed me this thing and had me look it over and read it and see what I thought of it. And I was like, yeah, man, that looks good, and they're like, well, what do you think that this person's going to need? Just kind of asking me questions and refining things. And then at the end of it, they're like, so are you going to do it? It was just kind of like, and I think at that point, the idea had been brought up to me several times, but like what was really important for me is that I got well first. I didn't want to be in a position of leadership when I knew that I couldn't lead. I needed the time to let go of my character defects that I could. I still have plenty of them, don't get me wrong, but I knew that like at 6 months or a year into it, I was not in a position where I was going to be able to truly like lead a house. I was going to take things personally. I was going to get resentments. I was going to do things out of spite. I needed to keep doing some work. And that's what I did. So when I was 18 months in and they asked me to become the lead, that's what I did. I took the position. Ran Stark Ave for 12 months or so, maybe a little bit longer. in Dover. During that time, they knocked down the other wall. So like when I first moved in, there was 10 beds, and then we knocked down the other wall, and we went up to, I think, 15 beds. During all of that, I ended up getting a job in treatment at Turning Point. I was very abstinence-based recovery at the time. I didn't believe in medically assisted recovery. I didn't like it. I didn't feel as though people were actually in recovery when they were doing that. So I get this job up there, and I start as a resident assistant. And part of the job is to like hand out meds and run groups and stuff like that. And what I got to see when I was up there is that like people taking their medicine as prescribed gives them an opportunity to do the work that they need in order to get well, in order to find recovery. I found that like my perception of what medically assisted recovery was based on a handful of people who were abusing their medication rather than this large amount of people who were actually taking it to try to get well. And so the conversation started with Sean. I believe he was kind of feeling the same way I was about it at the time. Like neither one of us were just kind of like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like this doesn't, I'm abstinent based, you know, like I'm abstinent based. Like that's, but we communicated and we talked and we met people and we explored, and the idea was born for the Elliott Bell House in Rochester. It was just a dream. It was just an idea that we would find a place that I would move out of the Dover house, and I would head up a medically assisted recovery treatment, medically assisted recovery taper house, where people who normally wouldn't be allowed into the Freeman house because they were on the last end of their taper, because it takes some time to get off of that. Like it's not just like, oh, I'm going to stop taking this and then they're done, you know. So we were turning people away who, you know, wanted to be off it in a month or 2 months, and they weren't able to come into the house because we were abstinent-based house. However, we liked the idea of providing a place for people to do that. And the Elliott Bell House was born. That was last August. Miracles that happen in these situations are just like, you know, Sean bought a house, like a nice house. And 20 minutes later, he was at my work with a key to hand it to me, you know? Just like a key to this beautiful house in Rochester, you know? Like, here, let's dream together, you know? And that's kind of like been our journey, is just like, we bounce ideas off each other and we dream and we come up with ideas and we implement them, and people start getting well, right? Like people have come into this house, made a decision to get off of their medically assisted recovery or their Suboxone. They come in and they start a taper plan and they complete the taper plan. And, you know, I was just having a conversation with somebody last night who was saying how grateful he was to actually be off it, and that his head's so much clearer now that he's off it, you know. And hopefully, you know, the next dream is to actually have a house for people that aren't necessarily ready to get off it, you know, because that's part of that love, right? Like that's this opportunity to say, like, I'm going to meet you where you're at. Like, I get that maybe you're not ready and that you have a different pathway than me, and I love you unconditionally. Like your pathway doesn't have to be the same pathway as mine. Like we can make something work together. To tell you exactly what I do is to just say that, like, I work with addicts and alcoholics in recovery, and I love them when they can't love themselves, you know? If people choose the 12 steps as a pathway to recovery, then that's a pathway that I can help somebody with, you know? And if they choose a different pathway to recovery, I will help them find their way to that pathway. So like as a case manager, I do recommend the Freeman House to certain individuals. And for other individuals, I feel like it's all about like which pathway you want to choose. Hands down, I believe that if you want to work a 12-step program, that the Freeman House is the way to go. Like we will hold people accountable. We have people in the house that are familiar with the 12 steps. We have a pathway to get you to your 4th step and start you writing. As far as like sober living being beneficial, like if you're on the fence or whatever, I can totally identify with that. I was on the fence. I didn't want to come to sober living. And since I have come to sober living, what I've found is a fellowship, a community of people who just want to help each other and pick each other up, an opportunity to be of service on a daily basis, and an opportunity to have people hold me accountable in situations where I wouldn't normally hold myself accountable. Like in times where that phone's like 10,000 pounds because you know that you should probably pick up the phone and call your sponsor. Well, that's a hard thing to do. But it's not that hard to walk out into the living room and sit down next to one of your buddies and talk about how shitty a day you had, right? To get that out and to share that with somebody else is part of what recovery is all about, right? It doesn't matter if it's somebody with 24 hours talking with somebody with 24 years. Like they benefit each other. Fellowship, accountability, love, respect, kindness, an opportunity to grow